everybody, and welcome to another episode of Connect Conversations. Today's conversation is all about strategies for leading a global corporate COE on reliability and maintenance improvement with special guest Tim Goshert. And it is brought to you as a part of Mobius Connect's ongoing YouTube series, Connect Conversations. I'm Kim Fugger, the manager of Mobius Connect, and I will be the moderator for today's session. First, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the host of Connect Conversations, global reliability improvement experts Doug Plucknette and Ron Moore. Hi, guys.
Hey, good morning or afternoon. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well,
Kim, how are you today?
Good, thank you.
You look and notice I wore one of my turtlenecks again for Ron. I know he likes them.
Yes.
Yeah. You need to work out more.
Look at the size of those.
Yeah, right.
Keep it up, all that yarn work. Well, before I officially pass the microphone over to you guys, I just want to encourage our audience here today to submit any questions that you have into the question panel. And during the conversation, Ron, Doug, or Tim, and Tim, I should say, will all be answering your questions live. So please use the chat feature for that. We will air your questions anonymously, so don't feel like you're going to get called out, or you're welcome to join, turn on your video and ask them too. They like that kind of stuff. But if you guys have any questions during the time, don't hesitate to reach out to us, talk. You can use the individual chat if you would like to as well. And they are going to provide their advice and perspectives, and everyone is here to directly help you. All right, so Doug, Ron, and Tim, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you guys now.
All right. Thank you. And thanks to everybody that's joined us. We appreciate you being here. We've got a special guest today, Tim Goshert. He's going to talk about centers of excellence. Tim was with Cargill for decades, I think, Tim, right? You and Rick.
33 years.
Yeah. Okay. Decades. So he's going to, give us some information, how they set up their COEs. I had the pleasure of working with Tim and Rick some of those years and really appreciated it. I thought they did really good work. So let me turn it over to Doug for a minute, and then we'll come back to you, Tim, and you can take us through what you guys did a bit. We may interrupt or comment or ask questions from time to time along with everybody else. Doug, you got any comments?
Of course I do.
Okay, go ahead, as usual.
So, yeah, Tim's been around the community for a number of years. He was, in fact, one of the leaders of the SMRP organization and a conference chair. He held a number of titles with SMRP and has been active in our community for not only was it with Cargill with decades, but he's been active in the reliability community for decades. And one of those rare leaders that from a large corporation that's willing to openly share what they're doing with others, and that's a great thing, a great trait to have for sure. So Tim, it's good to see your face today, and we're going to let you lead these things off and probably tell your story about how your Center of Excellence got started and some of the things that you did and would recommend that other companies do.
Well, yeah. Well, thanks everyone for allowing me to join today. Thanks to Mobius Connect and certainly Ron. It's been a while since I've seen you, Ron. I talk to Doug occasionally, so it's great to be on with you. Yeah, a little bit about myself, I guess. I spent. I'm a chemical engineer that got stuck in maintenance and reliability. Let's put it that way. So I spent 33 years with Cargill. They're a global food company, and I cut my teeth in operations, meaning I was my first job was actually a shift manager in a corn wet milling plant in the United States, and I spent my first 10 years of my career in operations, managing the operation of this 24-hour corn plant and I managed people, I managed different departments, and I got into the maintenance improvement and reliability improvement field, probably kicking and screaming as an operations person, because I inherited a department that, well, I didn't inherit, I took the job maybe by mistake, but probably changed my life. I took the job of a department that, could barely run 24 hours in a row, let alone weeks at a time without, reliability issues. And we had issues from safety to operational problems to lots and lots of mechanical problems. So that forced me into learning how equipment fails, and I got involved then in the maintenance of the plant and became a maintenance manager, and then got involved in a business unit, and eventually I was asked to lead the Cargill's corporate COE, Center of Excellence for Maintenance Reliability Improvement across the globe. And that was in about the year, that was like 2022, almost 25 years ago when that happened, I think. So that's a little bit of my background. And so leading this Center of Excellence, this was in the late 90s, 1998, 97 range. Cargill was globally was, and at a corporate level, creating what I'll call virtual centers of excellence, and each center of excellence was based on certain disciplines. One was capital deployment. They wanted to improve their capital projects, and so they had a capital deployment COE. That was probably one of the first, and they were seeing success with that. And so after a year, my boss at the time, who was the chief technology officer and the global VP of operations, who reported to the COE, he wanted to expand the thought process. And I think they developed an energy reduction COE, and then they developed the maintenance and reliability COE. And the idea was that it wouldn't be a big corporate organization. In fact, our COE, there was two corporate people basically that were paid by the corporation, and that was me and one person who was working on some of our IT solutions. Everything else was paid by the different business units. And so really I had a staff of 0 people at the time. And still the whole time I had that role for 10 to 12 years. And what I had to do was work with operational business unit leaders to understand their marketplace, their business case, and work with them to come up with a reason to improve their reliability and maintenance in their facilities. So it was all really a work of influencing people, and with really no direct reports. And the only authority really I had was that my boss was VP of operations globally. Now that was a big stick, but people could say no. It wasn't a command and control type of business. It was more of a matrix organization. And so we had to work with the different business units and the different business unit leaders that had their own goals. And we had to try to convince them that, hey, reliability makes sense. Improving the way we do maintenance makes sense. And learning how to do this makes sense. So that's sort of how it started, and that started in like I say, the mid 1990s, and I became more and more involved as the 90s rolled on, and then in the year 2000, I was asked to lead the COE, and which I created then a maintenance reliability steering committee, which I'll probably talk about later. So I'm hoping Doug and Ron, you have a couple questions.
Yeah,
I've got on.
Maybe it's a question of observation. As I recall, didn't you have reps at each plant who were supposed to carry that message forward and be like the champion at locally based on what they learned from you and Rick and other folks at the COE level?
Yeah, what it was is that Cargill was a big company at the time. They were divided into business units, 75 different business units across the world. And they were based on, marketplaces and different products. So of the 75 business units, I'd say we had like 20 to 25 that were large and that were very, very important. And so what the COE did, the first job I had to do was create a steering committee or a functional committee that had a representative from those large business units. So, for instance, one of the business units was North American oilseeds. So you mentioned Rick. Rick was the representative of that business unit, and then we had oilseeds group in Europe. We had a representative from that, and so it ended up, that we had a small steering team of about 10 or 12 people. Like that, and they were represented, and their job was like you said, Ron. Their job was to take the strategies that we agreed at the COE level and the steering committee level, and take it to their business unit and educate people and apply those principles and roll it out in their area. So when I didn't deal with individual plants unless they were very, very large plants. Maybe, and there were a handful of plants that I would deal with directly. But the people that would be dealing with those plants were the leaders, the reliability and maintenance leaders that was developed in that business unit. So in the beginning, one of the first things I had to do, we had a couple mature businesses that already had reliability and maintenance leaders as a business unit level. So some of these others, I had to convince the operational leaders and the business unit leader in that business that they need that role, which was sort of an overhead role, right, for them. And they needed that role to lead their efforts and to apply the practices and principles to their business unit. So that's sort of how it happened, right? And then and there were some business units that really didn't even adopt it in the end. The majority did, but not everyone did.
Well, I think probably what was most impressive in terms of what I saw with your Center of Excellence was that they put training on the front end of this. It wasn't just a launch of buzzwords and, you're going to do PDM or you're going to do CBM or you're going to do RCM or you're going to do root cause analysis. It was really, how does reliability impact your operations? And then what are the different tools you can use to improve that, right? To identify defects and eliminate defects so that you end up producing more, and getting people to understand that, I think, up front with the training that you guys provided around the world was a big, big piece of that. Can you talk about how that program got put together?
Yeah, well, it really started with, it starts with two things, I think. One, you have to understand every business unit had a different marketplace and different drivers of the business and had different opportunities. So the first thing you had to do, that I had to do when working with that business unit, is understand their business, understand the business case, and help them put together a high level business case for why this makes sense. If it didn't make dollars and cents, they might as well not do it, right? So the first step is always, what's the business case? And for me, what I had to first do was understand their business, and that took a little bit of time. Once I understood the business and they believed I understood it, then I could help them apply these reliability principles. And so so the first thing is always the business case. Why are you doing this? Does it make sense? And then once you have a business case, we created a vision for what that future could be, meaning, hey, you have all these opportunities. We need to fill these opportunities, and this is what we're trying to do. And the global business case for Cargill was we needed to improve reliability for more production so we could service our customers with quality product when they wanted it, and we wanted to reduce cost, right? Those are the two big drivers probably in every business. Sometimes production was more beneficial than cost, and sometimes the other way around. So you had to, create a vision so the people the people in the business unit as leaders first will understand, hey, this is what we're trying to do.
Yeah. One thing, just me comment, most people may not be familiar with Cargill, but as I recall, they're about an $80 billion, $100 billion a year business that's privately held. So we're not talking about just a couple $1 million here. We're talking, substantial amounts of money that could run into the billions, in terms of net benefit to the business as a whole. So
correct. They've been for the last 30 years the largest privately held company in the world. Sometimes Coke Industries out of Wichita, sometimes they flip back and forth, but
yep.
Cargill's been a privately held company by the Cargill McMillan family. They're based out of Minneapolis, hence that's why I live here. And when I left the company, they had 1,400 facilities in 69 countries. And let me see how many employees, 160,000 employees.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure where they're at today. They're probably around the same size or maybe bigger. They've been moving their businesses around a little bit, but they're a large global company. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, just another comment that these principles apply whether or not you're a 10 million or 100 million or a $100 billion company. The principles still apply. It's just a question of how you properly adapt to that business and that circumstance and leverage the knowledge that you had across all those business units. One other comment I wanted to make here, it seemed to me that Ron Christensen, he's retired now, it seemed to me that he was fairly instrumental in providing that global influence, that global support to continue to, fund, sustain, drive, encourage, support, demand, all those kinds of things, what you guys were doing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, without a strong global operations leader like Ron, who reported directly to the CEO and the corporate leadership team, and he was on the corporate leadership team, without his drive and understanding and desire to do this, it would have been a lot more difficult. So you have to have a leader like a Ron that supports and allows the COE to do what it needs to do. I mean, he didn't tell us to do very many things. He just supported things that we found works at other industries. And, we learned a lot from just going to different industries outside of the food business and applying those same things to our plants. The other thing that comes to mind you mentioned is that Cargill, they had facilities that were very big. They would, rival the size of a medium-sized petrochemical plant, but then they would also have small facilities like little grain elevators in the middle of Iowa. with like 3 people running the operations. And we were applying the principles, no matter the size of the operation. We were applying those principles in those type of facilities.
And
how
I
you
think
did it would be different, but you applied the same principles.
Yep.
that just gets into one of the key things that you said that I don't want missed is that, you come to these places, you talk about the reliability of the training, and you often hear we're different, right? And those of us in the consulting business hear that a lot. And I think what you said that's very important is we took time to learn and understand their business, right? And then once we understood their business, we showed them some of the tools they could use to help improve, rather than just trying to force these things down their throat, because they do feel they're different, right? And one of the things you learn as a consultant is you're not really all that different, right? But in reality, it's the teaching of this and getting people to understand how it helps based on how their business works, right? You have to understand that business first. It does help.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Habit 5 is a pretty simple but hard to do concept. It's seek to understand before being understood. So if you can get a business or a plant to believe that you understand that business as well as they do, well, maybe not as well as they do, but enough to then to provide input, they have the ability then to listen to you. So it was an influence game. You would work on educating and influencing it. Now, you did talk earlier about education. After the business case and vision for what the future could be, the third thing is always education. And so I always stressed, you have to educate yourself first. So I had goals of reading a book a month, and many of our steering committee members did the same. We went to different, and the reason I got involved in SMRP and in other conferences was that I learned from other people in different businesses in those conferences. So the first goal in education is educate yourself so you understand it and can influence people and teach people the principles. If you don't understand it, then you're going to have a difficult time influencing other people, because you have to know the subject sort of inside and out to be able to influence it, because there's going to be people that are going to try to play stump the chump on you. Stump the chump is not much fun when you are a chump and don't know the subject matter. So the first thing is, you really have to educate yourself and understand the material yourself and do kinds of things. Then the second thing we did as the steering team, my job was to, influence them so they educated themselves. And some did better than others, but all of them did it very well. We made an agreement as a steering committee member that we all would receive a CMRP designation from SMRP. And some of our steering committee members, we had a corporate purchasing person on our steering committee. We had a corporate IT person, and both those folks basically got their CMRP. They understood the business well enough to be able to do that. And then what we did is that we're then now we're into educating the masses. And the masses basically was, we worked on educating leadership and management from the CEO level down to plant level management people. So and this was Ron Christensen's idea, because they had done the same thing in the other COE, the Capital Project Delivery COE, and had pretty good success. we created a 2.5-day best practice workshop where we were educating high level reliability and maintenance principles to, probably our typical class size was 25 to 30 people. We would do 2.5-day workshops somewhere in the world, a region of the world, for 1 week. So we would, go to Thailand and Bangkok, and our operations in Bangkok, we would have 2 workshops there for a week. Some of it simultaneously translated. We did a lot of simultaneous translation of that workshop in South America, as well as we did it in China. China was interesting, in Shanghai. So what we were trying to do is just have people understand what the principles are, the best practice principles we're trying to deploy. Now, in the beginning, most of our people that attended that workshop, and in the beginning, I'm saying the first 3 months to a year, 6 months, were maintenance people, or, maintenance managers, but over time, the 75% of the people that we were that came to those workshops were operations people, accounting people, finance people, purchasing people, engineering people, commercial leaders. So we were educating the organization of what it means to improve reliability as an organization. Because reliability is not a maintenance thing, it's an organizational thing. And you need people to understand that and do what they need to do. So we spent lots of time training the masses. I estimate probably 30% of my time was on that effort.
Yeah, just
out of some of those things.
Yeah, just a couple of comments to reinforce what you've said. If all you have is maintenance guys, you're sort of preaching to the choir, that old
Absolutely.
saying. So if you don't get the operations folks and some of the site management team involved in this and demonstrate to them how it's a collaborative, team-based approach to eliminate the defects, put your right processes and so on, then you're not going to be nearly as successful. So, and the second point I wanted to make was back to the, comment about Ron Christensen, senior level guy, who's the sponsor, is the phrase I use for all this. Some of you, and I've seen this happen, somebody like Tim will go out and they'll get anointed with this responsibility, and they'll have somebody above them that says, yeah, go make it happen. And what can happen in some cases, you get permission, but you don't get active sponsorship. And active sponsorship means they're engaged in helping set the strategy, set the agenda, provide the resources, encourage the participation in the plants and all that sort of thing. And when they're active sponsors, much as they would be, for example, in safety, you have a much, much higher probability of success, as opposed to just, I've given you permission, go away and get it done and check that box. So, and it can be kind of a subtle difference, but it's a really, really important difference to have that active sponsorship. So those are my couple of comments there, Tim.
All right. And of course, I have to jump in.
Okay, jump in.
All right. The other thing that I do remember from your workshop was, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this really gives an opportunity when you're doing this globally, right? You're going around, you learn, you meet different people, you introduce them to these concepts and train them. And then from that, people go out and do things, right? So how important were the case studies that came out of this, right? So you work with some people in Thailand and they go out and they do some things at their plant and you say, all right, now when you're at the next thing and you've learned about what's going on in Thailand, who can I call? Who can I talk to that's in a similar business to share case studies, that has similar equipment to share case studies? How much of that went on within your organization?
A lot of stuff, and things that maybe I was involved in, or some members of our steering committee, but sometimes it was being shared without us knowing it, right? Because we did things to try to facilitate that, and what we did, we ended up having what we called a global reliability and maintenance conference. We had it every 2 years. We held it in Minneapolis, and we had people come in, and attendance was probably 300 people. And what we would do is highlight those cases in those conferences. But we would talk about those as we met as a steering committee on a periodic basis, and then we would send that out. But yeah, we were trying to get people talking from one business unit to another, or within business units to another, and getting a business unit of say 20 oilseeds plants, getting them cooperating together to make themselves all better and not competing against each other, right? There was in the early days, one site would compete against the other site, but we were trying to help each other get better. So there was lots of that collaboration.
Yep. Maybe you could comment about some of the specifics that that were embedded within the teaching, the learning, the practices that were trying to be applied, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, in the workshop, Ron. Yeah.
Yeah.
What we started out with, was a pretty solid discussion and showing what the business case was for Cargill to begin with, and it was hundreds of millions of dollars a year of improvement. It was so big that what I did was say, well, it's so big, if I'm half wrong, it's still this so many million. And I can be 90% wrong, and it's so many million that isn't worth working on. And you get the people in the workshop always said, well, of course it's worth working on it. I said, so I'm 90% wrong in my numbers, and it's still worth working on. And they go, yeah. So you get people to understand there's a huge business case and why it was that. Then we went through basically what we called the proactive model. We walked through that, which was really a transition, over high level transition of how you go from a reactive environment to a proactive environment. And then we dove right into the basics of focusing on the basic fundamentals of RCM, which is, understanding criticality of your assets, understanding that assets fail in different ways. You have to understand how it fails. Does it fail due to wear? Does it fail randomly? And depending on how it fails and what the failure mode is, you would apply different strategies, condition-based strategies, preventive maintenance plans, failure finding strategies. It just went back to the basics. We went to the basics of RCM. I mean, you read a book on RCM, and that's what we did. We taught high-level basics of what we're trying to do. Then we would go in, because we had to improve our condition monitoring, we would go into 3 to 4 hours of explaining the basics and the fundamentals of, like, say, vibration analysis and what equipment it can be used on and why it's so important to do that. And what we were trying to do there is we were trying to get more condition monitoring working, because almost 90% of your equipment fails randomly. So you want condition-based maintenance instead of time-based maintenance.
Yep.
And then we go into
particularly the intrusive stuff. Yeah,
exactly. And then we would spend another 4 hours on work management execution, from work identification to what's work planning and how that's not work scheduling and work coordination. And we work, this is the basic fundamentals of why you need a computerized maintenance management system. Why do you need a work order for all work? What that value is to do that, and how to plan and schedule work on how to plan work and then schedule planned work on a weekly basis. That's what we do. And then the last 4 hours, we talk about precision skills, like precision maintenance skills, precision lubrication. What else we talk about? We ended up total cost of ownership. You need to buy the right parts. You can't buy the cheapest and expect that to be the right. You need to make your purchasing decisions based on total cost of ownership, and buy the right motor, buy the right pump, not because it's the cheapest, because it's the best. And so that's sort of what we went through with everyone, and just at a high level, right? At a high level. But it's just basic reliability fundamentals that you go to any conference, you're going to hear them said. Yeah. So it's not rocket science what we were teaching. It's not intellectual property, really. It's just applying. The secret is applying those principles and having discipline to apply them. Yeah. But again, we were trying to get the group to focus on making healthy assets run, produce, make quality product for our customers.
Yeah. Just a quick kind of humorous comment. Dick Pettigrew one time, he said, well, it is rocket science. And the point he was trying to make there was, if you're in launching rockets to the moon, as they are at this moment, you got to do 1,000 things spot on. Screw up one, and you're done.
Yeah. Well, they canceled it, huh? They had a problem, so they're going back to the drawing board.
So it's about engaging the entire workforce and doing all the thousands of things really well, so that it comes together in a comprehensive level of excellent performance. So it just I thought that was an interesting comment that he made about what kind of is rocket science. So, but in terms of principle, it's not. It's basic stuff. Yeah, Doug.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to point out too is here you talked a little bit about RCM, and this is one of the few companies that I worked with that when they did an RCM analysis, they by business unit would invite several different plants in to participate in that analysis, as opposed to saying, gee, this is only we're only going to do this in Memphis, for example. If they did one in Memphis, they'd have people come in from other different plants in the U.S. And if I was in Europe, they'd have sometimes 16, 17 different plants represented, a bunch of different languages being spoken. It certainly was a challenge. But in the end, what they came up with was a plan to implement. Right. And the important piece that came out of that were, it's not just one plant getting benefit out of this, it's multiple plants. All right. So you start multiplying that number of what their savings were and what their reliability improvements were. And in the end, it also identified, who's the leaders and who's the laggers when it comes to getting things done. And what do we need to do to help those laggers move up the chain here? So,
great example of collaborating between the business units, and sometimes different business units there if they had the same type of equipment on RCM.
One comment I wanted to make here, we talked early on about what's the business case, because that's front and center. You got to understand the business and demonstrate that there's tremendous value here. One of the I hate to use the phrase, but rules of thumbs that I use in going into an operation is if you apply these principles properly, you probably have something on the order of a 10% reduction in your maintenance cost and as much as a 10% improvement in your production output. So what's that worth to you? And, if I'm only half right, it's still worth a ton of money. And if in many organizations, that's somewhat conservative. If you're in discrete type operations, probably 20% improved production output. If you're in a process plant like a refinery, it may only be 5%. But we're still talking tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars that this is worth. And most outfits could afford to put in a few $1,000,000 to get that money. And so the business case is pretty compelling, at least in my mind, from what I've seen out there in most companies. So anyways, Tim, do you have a comment on that?
Your 10 and 10 example is very conservative.
Yeah. Well, but again,
I've
if I'm only half right,
bigger. Yeah.
It's a target rich environment in most companies.
I mean, the business case for nearly every business that Cargill had and probably has today is a no-brainer. I mean, it's because you're producing when you get equipment healthy, it produces quality product when it's supposed to, almost on demand, without failure. And without failure, that reduces cost. And any business, any business with any type of equipment, that's what you need. You need equipment that doesn't fail, right? And if it doesn't fail, you don't spend money on it, and you produce quality product, right? If you do it correctly. So it's a huge business case.
Yep.
And as you mentioned earlier, it goes across all aspects of your business, but one of the pieces that you brought up that maybe I think deserves a little more focus would be spare parts. You were one of the unusual companies that actually took the time to say, we're going to look at spares in terms of what they do for us on the overall life cycle, not the immediate cost, but which ones are the most reliable, which ones are going to last. So that went down to pumps, it went to motors, it went to gearboxes, couplings, right? And I see this continuously in the companies that I visit. They'll have 6 or 8 different brands of centrifugal pumps, and then another 6 or 8 different brands of motors and valves, and it goes on and on and on. And you guys at some point in time got smart enough to say, holy smokes, we're carrying spares for all these different ones. How did you go about that? Where did that action come from?
Well, it goes back to total cost of ownership. And as I said, in our steering committee, we had a corporate procurement member who was responsible for MRO parts and things like that. And he, along with his boss, who is the corporate procurement leader, I think they reported to Ron, Ron Christensen, I don't remember, but they were convinced that total cost of ownership in buying new equipment and spare parts is the way to go. And therefore they set up their procurement organization to with incentives that you just don't buy cheap parts, right, or cheap equipment. So for instance, that we'd have a team of technical experts along with procurement, and I was part of a team that did evaluation on NEMA motors. What's the best motor to buy from who and why? And we came to an agreement with that supplier who was the best. And then, we did the negotiation, but negotiation to get a good price. But was it the cheapest motor in in the world? No, we didn't want the cheapest motor in the world. We wanted the best. And when you look at motors really simple when you look at it, because if you look at the total cost of ownership, and I think EPRI has studies on this, 80 to 90% of the total cost of owning a motor is the energy it takes to run the motor operationally, right?
Yep.
So it's pretty simple. What the best motor to buy in the world is the most energy efficient motor in the world to buy, right? Now, so that was it. It was pretty simple. We find the most energy efficient motor in the world to buy. Well, that's not so easy for manufacturers to do, because for a motor to be very energy efficient, that air gap between the stator and the rotor has to be very small. Well, if you don't have it electrically and mechanically balanced such that it can't run in that small air gap, it's very difficult to get those good efficiency numbers. So that's what we looked at. So basically, the best motor in the world is the most energy efficient, and also because of precision balance reasons, it's the most reliable. So it made the decision on who can do that, who can actually produce those motors in the world. And there's few electric motor companies in the world that could do that. So that's just one example. We did that with, centrifugal pumps, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I would comment, Tim, you were buying the cheapest over the life of the equipment.
Over the life of the equipment, but not the initial purchase price, Ron.
Right.
Sure.
Just there's some guys out there.
You're absolutely right.
Some guys out there who study this, who say that the price, when you buy, a piece of equipment, the price is about 25% of the total cost of ownership. And I've seen too many companies focus on the price, and then the VP of purchasing reports saving all this money, but that money never shows up on your bottom line, on your, EBITDA or whatever you consider your bottom line. And it's because you spend whatever they save, you spend it in spares and lost production, and then, a raft of things, the consequential costs for buying, quote, the cheapest price as opposed to the total cost of ownership or the cheapest over the life of the equipment.
So by the way, now that I'm kind of in the same position as you two fellas, semi-retired, let's call it. I've said right along that there is a business case to start a business for doing just that, right?
Yeah.
Going out and identifying what's the best, what's the most reliable, what is the cheapest in terms of overall life cycle, and then selling that information. Of course, boy, it would really rely on some good legal agreements now, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, and rely on a lot of research and, and so on. I'm just not prepared to spend that much time on it. I'm like you, I'm quasi-retired, and I like being quasi-retired.
You and me both.
That sounds good, but the issue that I have is there's very few organizations that I see are aligned to believe total cost of ownership is the way to go and really believe it. And the leadership we had in corporate procurement at Cargill at the time, they were committed to it. And because it did take some effort and time to do these on these different major things. But, when I worked for Allied Reliability, after my career with Cargill, I worked for Allied for 7-8 years. And I worked with other organizations, and boy, they would be a tough sell for total cost of ownership, most of them.
Yeah.
In fact, I didn't see one that really had that idea.
Yeah. I think what happens in most of these companies, at least that I've worked with, is there are different incentives in different functional areas, many of which are in conflict with each other.
Absolutely.
And if
that's the problem.
If you don't get those aligned, if the purchasing guy is rewarded for saving money, buying stuff, they will do that, and they'll report it, and they'll get a bonus for it. If the capital projects guy is rewarded for, meeting budget and schedule, they will do that, and they'll get rewarded for it. And if the operations guys are rewarded for getting the crap out the door, not crap, but getting the product out the door, they will do that no matter the impact on the equipment. And
it just might be crap if they're doing that, but
well, it might be. but the incentives are not aligned to facilitate collaboration. And so the measures and the incentives associated with those measures need to be, to some extent, cross-functional so that it facilitates collaboration for the greater good of the business. And most companies do not do a particularly good job at that. And they would be well served if they did.
So, absolutely.
Yep.
All right. We are starting to push our envelope here, but I'd like to propose in a couple more months we have another one of these and talk about, you did your center of excellence here. What are some of the recommendations you would make to take a plant that's, let's call it, is in complete disarray? One of those places where you walk in the door and you go, wow, what disaster went on here? How do they get back on their feet? And what type of plan would it take for them to go from worst in class to, I'm not going to say world class, but something they can be proud of? I think that would make an interesting presentation between the three of us.
I'll give you
your different ideas.
I'll give you a trailer: leadership, leadership, and leadership.
Yeah,
that get you some teamwork and alignment. And anyways, would that be a trailer? But sorry, Doug, go ahead. Or Tim.
Well, what I would say, Doug, I would tell them to do exactly what we talked about for the last hour.
Yeah,
that's what you have to know first, right? Business case, have a vision, then understand how your equipment fails, educate people. Is exactly that. You just follow that same process, just on a smaller level.
Yep.
And interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's how I would do it. And that's sort of the clients that I work with. That's what I'm trying to get them to do, trying to influence them to do the right things at the right time. But it follows the same path.
Yeah, we got.
So it's always fun. Yeah, fun to see that change happen on one of those places where you walk in and you know where you went because you can follow your footprints in reverse to get the hell out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've all been to places like that, So any last comments, guys, before we kick it back to Tim? We didn't get any questions, so it looks like we've either answered everything or nobody was listening. I'm not sure which.
Or we baffled them, maybe.
Yeah. So, Kim, are you out there?
I am. Thank you guys so much. This was a really, really good conversation today. And is there anything else you guys wanted to wrap up? Or Tim, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, could you mention a place they can find you?
Well, the easiest way to get a hold of me is probably on LinkedIn. You can just search my name, and on my profile it shows my resume and contact info.
All right, thank you. And, yes, we'll make sure
that's probably the easiest.
Yeah, we'll make sure we include that in the show notes here. And as always, again, thank you, Ron and Doug, for a great time. On behalf of our entire team here at Mobius Connect, thank you to our wonderful audience for joining us too. Just a quick reminder, you can see past episodes of Connect Conversations on YouTube and reliabilityconnect.com. If you are interested in engaging with other industry professionals or would like to participate on the industry's live feed and forums, please join Mobius Connect. Again, that's www.mobiusconnect.com. You can create your free profile. Be sure to follow us on all our social media at Mobius Connect to stay up to date with the latest community happenings. Be on the lookout. We do have episodes that air typically every other Tuesday here at 2 p.m. So check out, again, Reliability Connect for the registration info. Our next episode will be case study success and failure in applying 5S, and that'll be with Doug and Ron. Thanks again for joining us. Please stay safe, have a great day, and we'll see you all next time.